Hey guys, this video is not for the beginners, it is for someone who's been on this journey for some time, someone who's learned a lot. They already experienced peaceful sleep, not worrying about sleep, and probably they even considered already that things are back to normal and there's no fear, no thinking about sleep. So basically living our lives as usual and not worrying about sleep, and then experiencing a speed bump after a long time of doing better. If someone is finding themselves in this situation, so this video is specifically for those. If it's not your case, you can just ignore this video and watch some other stuff. If you find yourself in this situation, I can totally understand that that can be very frustrating. And in fact, this is something that I went through myself. And if you check my video about the timeline, when I was talking about the timeline, you will see in more details like how I had a speed bump after a very long time of perfect sleep. And I just want to talk a little bit about that, how it happens, why it happens, and most importantly, how to overcome that obstacle. I feel like this type of speed bumps, when we start having, increased anxiety, hyperarousal, after a very long time of sleeping great, it is kind of like one of the natural parts of the journeys. And by that, I mean that in general, the way I look at the recovery journey as a learning process. In the beginning, the brain learns to fear wakefulness. So it is afraid of being awake at night, of not sleeping, because there are, many reasons, whatever the brain comes up with, right? And every speed bump is kind of facing a certain side of that fear. So let's say in the beginnings, there might be fear of having a terrible night after, sleepless, having a terrible day after a sleepless night. And then once that fear is being seen through, the brain sees that there is actually nothing terrible is going to happen if we have, a night of no sleep. Then we kind of we stop fearing that this much, like having a worse night, and then we begin to sleep already better. And then after a while, another speed bump can hit, and usually it is about something new, some new side of that fear. So what happens on this journey is that the brain kind of like tries to look under every stone if there is actual threat. So usually every speed bump is when the brain finds a new thing to worry about. So it might come up with a new idea. Oh, here's the fear I haven't looked at. Maybe it's a real threat. Maybe I need to really check if you really need to be safe. And this is how usually speed bumps begin. At least that's how I see it. And when we went through this learning process and we realized that, okay, there's nothing to worry about actually. I know that even if I have wakefulness, if I have bumpy night, or even if I have, anxiety, it's not the end of the world. I know that it's going to end and I don't have to really do anything about that. I can just sit with this, I can just let it happen. And in the meantime, I'm doing, my usual stuff. And this usually kind of leads us to the place when we no longer struggle, thoughts about sleep kind of fade away, and we find ourselves that we are just living our lives as usual. But when this kind of experience happens, that after a long time of sleeping well, we again experience the return of that fear. What that actually means, it doesn't mean at all, in my opinion, that we are going backwards, we are regressing, or we forgot what we learned. I don't think about this way. It is more that the brain has stumbled upon a new kind of fear it hasn't yet looked at. And this fear is usually about experiencing a speed bump after a long period of time of good sleep. The reason why this fear hasn't shown up before was because we didn't have that. We didn't have that time when we were, sleeping great for a long time. So there was no opportunity to meet with that fear. And now as we were witnessing, okay, there is already huge progress I've made, and I'm sleeping great. I don't worry about it. Life is back to normal, and so on and so on. So the brain might have its final attempt to keep you safe. Just to check, like, are you sure that this big chunk of, good sleep is not just a fluke or coincidence or something just like, accidentally happened, and in reality you're still like in insomnia struggle. So this is a very kind of like specific for insomnia type of fear and the pattern. And because it happened after such a long time of good sleep, it can be very frustrating. It can actually be even more frustrating speed bump than the speed bumps before. Because before we knew that we are in struggle, we are still on the journey, we are still learning. And now when it happens like after that, this gets as additional layer of this suffering where we know that we had it and we kind of lost it. But we didn't really lose it. It's just that the fear of experiencing speed bump in the future has not been properly looked at, has not been faced and kind of demystified, dissolved. I view any type of speed bumps as an opportunity to show the brain, to teach it that we are going to be okay, even if this happens. So once we recognize that this type of experiences are nothing unusual and it's not really a new thing or something like is, coming back or whatever we had was just like an illusion or a fluke, it is more that the brain has activated once again its protective mechanism and it wants to make sure that we are safe. That's all what is happening. When we start seeing this that way, we normalize for ourselves that it is okay for the fear to pop up at any moment. This is when this fear starts to kind of like fading and dissolving until we kind of like naturally exit this speed bump. And what happens after this speed bump ends is that we learn that we don't have to be afraid of speed bumps in the future, because even if they happen, they are going to end. So we don't have to worry about it. And this is where the paradox is. Because we are not afraid of having a speed bump in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, we just like, it doesn't matter. Even if it happens, that's fine. That's okay. It will end. This is when we actually stop having them. So the paradox of making sure that we'll never have a speed bump is becoming okay with having a speed bump. This is very, it's very ironical. It's very hard to really learn on this kind of emotional level, but I feel like those speed bumps do exactly this job at teaching us to stop fearing this. But for now, as we are in this speed bump, after long period of time of sleeping better, it can suck. It can be very frustrating. It can be a real bummer, and we don't have to, try to persuade that it's all, like we are not feeling frustrated or everything is perfect and so on, because that might be a little bit like hiding our true emotions, which can backfire. But what I notice is that usually the reason why we get stuck in this type of speed bump is, first of all, when we enter this type of speed bump, we kind of come into this with this very confident mindset. And this confidence is a little bit control based, which is natural, like because the brain tries to control, likes to control things. So it might create this kind of like confidence that like, even if I get speed bump, I can manage it. I can make it in a reasonable time. So for example, when I had the speed bump after a really long time of doing better, my first reaction to this was like, oh, okay, it's fine that I'm having this like sleeplessness. I give the speed bump like 2-3 days and then it's over. And because I kind of like set for myself this kind of goal, like, I will deal with it for 2-3 days and then it will be gone. What happens is that on third day, it was still there. I was getting anxious. Then fourth day, I was realizing like, okay, this thing takes longer than I expected. Then fifth day happened and so on. And that's when I would begin to panic. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm not managing this speed bump. I cannot do anything about that. But the only thing why that speed bump got longer was because this belief that I can somehow control the duration of my speed bump. I can somehow control how and when I fall asleep, which is again the illusionary control, because in reality we don't have that level of control. It is helpful to see what is the belief that runs that speed bump. Maybe it is just an idea that I'm not supposed to have long speed bumps by this time. I'm not supposed to have speed bumps that last longer than whatever X amount of days. Or I'm not supposed to have speed bumps at all because I'm recovered, so I should not have them. But in reality, the resistance to have these experiences is what recreates those experiences. So again, the reason why we slept so well before was not because we learned how to sleep or how to control our emotions, but because we realized that we don't have to be afraid of speed bumps, that we can completely allow the night to unfold however it unfolds without trying to, manage it or manipulate it or somehow control it, but we just let the things, just unfold and not really try to be like the drivers on this process. And this is when we become okay with experiencing a speed bump. This is when speed bumps cease to exist. But after a long time, the brain might get into this illusion that it controls the situation. We begin to develop this identity as the one who beat the insomnia, and now the one who is not supposed to have speed bumps, and the one who knows how to beat speed bumps. And it's helpful just to see, because it's again like a fake sense of control. And in reality, the reason why we had peaceful sleep was because we were not afraid to experience stuff. So I hope that this video was helpful for those who find themselves in this situation. And just I want to say that it is completely normal to have this kind of type of speed bump after a long time. And this speed bump is another learning opportunity to show the brain that we don't have to be afraid of speed bump happening in the future. And most importantly, to show the brain that even this speed bump will end.